Well, here we are, the end of the first week in January 21. And obviously we're not in Australia, we are in Japan, in Toyama, Japan. Why don't you come on inside and let me tell you the story of how we got to be here in Japan and the project that we've got planned for the next couple of years. Come on inside. Hi, my name is Kevin and I am married to Megumi. This story starts back in 2019 when we were in Japan. Wow, remember that? Remember when you used to be able to get onto a plane and fly anywhere you wanted to go? Well, this story starts back in 2019 when we were here visiting Meg's family. Before I go any further, I want to say that I am a Christian and that was a decision that I made when I was 15 years old. And so for the last 45 years I have lived with the belief that God has a plan and a purpose for each one of us. And I say that to bring some framework or context to the story which you are about to hear. So this story starts in, as I said, in April of 2019. We were visiting Meg's family and it became obvious that Meg's mother's dementia was progressing. There would be a need for us to return to Japan to help look after her. My situation work-wise is that the entertainment venue where I've been working was going to be closing in September of 2020 for a period of 2 years while it underwent a redevelopment. I was not expecting to be employed during that time and was expecting to be made redundant. So we talked about it. We thought that may be a good time for us to come to move to Japan and to look after Meg's mum. However, I wanted something to do. I needed something to do. And so I started searching the internet for possible ideas and things that I could come up with that I would be able to do while I was living here in Japan. One dream that I've always had was to build a boat. And so I started searching for boat designs. I came across a design by Dudley Dix, who turned out to be quite a well-renowned and respected boat designer. One of his designs in particular attracted my attention. It was a 47-foot plywood and epoxy construction catamaran. As I searched through the website, I found that there was a 47-foot boat being built in Melbourne. So I reached out to Kel, who was building the boat, and asked him some questions about costs and what he expected, how much it was going to cost him to build, and just some really basic questions like that. And it turned out that it looked feasible, that it looked like that it was possible to do. Meg came in and was asking me, well, what do you think we're going to do? And I said, well, look, I've got an idea. It's a little bit out there, but you know, it's doable, I think. And she said, well, tell me about it. And I thought, oh, well, I don't really have all the details just yet. But she said, no, tell me. So I said, well, okay. And I told her about the plan to build a boat here in Japan. To my utter surprise, she said, that sounds like a great idea. So Meg has been on board with it right from day one. And I think it's important that for a couple that we be in agreement with what we're doing. So after returning from Japan to Australia, I made contact with Kel and organised the time to come down and see him, which we did. At the end of June we drove down to Melbourne and we spent a day with Kel and his wife and looking over his boat and talking to them about the construction process and how they went about it, and anything they would do differently or do better next time round. And it was a great time. And I'm so grateful to Kel for making the time available and sharing all of his insights into this building project. We came away that weekend fully convinced that this was the project for us. There was one more person that I wanted to run this idea by, and that was my accountant. Now, Wayne has been looking after our accounts for a long time. I really respect his advice. So I made an appointment with Wayne, and we went down and had a chat to him, talked about retirement, we talked about super plans, and I mentioned to him at the end of the conversation about a plan to build a boat. Now, I was quite expecting Wayne to say, "Kev, don't be so stupid, don't be so silly, don't waste your money, put your money in something safe like shares or property or things like that." But to my surprise, he said, "Well, that sounds like a great idea." So we walked away from a meeting with the accountant with a very positive attitude that yes, I'm not being silly, and that this is something that is doable and that we can achieve. So in August, we started to plan our second trip to Japan for the year. The purpose of this trip, or the main purpose of this trip, is to find and locate an appropriate place that we might be able to build the boat. Now at this stage we were thinking maybe buying a block of land and building something, or renting a space. We weren't sure what exactly was to offer, so the idea would be to go and spend some time and look around and see if we can find something. I went and saw a friend of mine in the language centre in Toyama. She put me on to a friend of hers, Takamori-san, who is in the yacht club in Toyama. Now, I didn't even know that Toyama had a yacht club at that stage. And so I contacted Takamori-san, and we had a chat, and I told him about what I was thinking of doing. He suggested that we meet, which we did. On a Sunday afternoon, we met at the yacht club, and Takamori-san invited the president of the yacht club, Takakuwa-san, and the three of us sat around the table and we looked at the study plans that I had for the boat, and discussed some of the aspects of the boat. And the harbour master was there, so he came over and had a look as well, and we went out into the harbour and had a look at where the boat could be docked if once it was completed. So that was a really good meeting. Takakuwa-san suggested there was a place quite close to the yacht club that may be suitable, and we went round and had a look at it. And yes, it seemed like that it would certainly be big enough. It's right on the water, and it was empty and available. So Takakuwa-san was going to talk with the owner of the building and see if he would be willing to lease the building to us to build a boat. During the course of 2020, discussions with the owner of the boathouse and Takakuwa-san have resulted in the fact that he is indeed willing to rent the boathouse to us, and next week we will be signing a lease for that. So that's exciting, and we'll have a place to build, and hopefully next week we'll be able to show you that. So in August we started to plan for our second trip to Japan. The main goal of this trip was to secure a place, or investigate a place where we would be able to build the boat. When I went to book the tickets for our flights, The return flight, we like to use the 4 o'clock flight out of Toyama back to Tokyo, and then a 9:30 flight out of Tokyo to Sydney. When I was booking the flights, we had all the flights booked. We went to the checkout to pay, and as I was about to pay, the site crashed. So, which meant I had to start all over again and put in all the details. Now, when I went through the second time, there was no option for a 4 o'clock flight, which was strange because there was still plenty of seats on the flight only 10 minutes earlier. Because that wasn't available, we booked the 7 o'clock flight. 7 o'clock flight is okay, but it's very tight from the time it lands at Haneda domestic, and by the time we make our way around to Haneda International, it's very tight to get to the connecting flight to Sydney. But as that was our only option, we booked it and went with it. Remember this, because this is an important part in the story. Now, just a few days before we were due to leave Sydney to go to Japan, I received a phone call from a friend of mine in Chiang Mai who wanted my advice on some PA systems. He was going to be running a youth camp for orphans in Thailand and wanted to know my advice, wanted some advice on which sound system to get. He sent me some photos and I was able to give him some advice. Then he asked me, would I be interested in coming up and operating the audio for the youth camp? Now normally I would jump at an opportunity like that, but I was a little bit hesitant this time round. There were two things that made me a little bit hesitant. One was that we'd sold property earlier in the year, and we had quite a large tax bill to pay. On top of that, I also wanted to purchase the plans for the boat. Now the plans were about $8,000 given the exchange rate at the time, and I was just a little hesitant to part with the extra couple of $1,000s it would cost me to go up to Chiang Mai and do the youth camp. But on the day we were leaving to fly out to Japan, I said, blow it. And so I purchased tickets, or a ticket for myself, to fly up to Chiang Mai. Now, the only thing was, we arrived back from Japan on Monday morning. The flight for Chiang Mai or Thailand was Tuesday morning. So it was quiet. We just had one day to change over and then pack my bag and off to Thailand. Now, roll forward to the weekend that we're leaving Japan, and Typhoon Hagibis hits Japan on the Saturday. It grounds absolutely every flight. There's no flights flying. Sunday morning there was no flights, and we started to worry, thinking, oh, how are we going to get home? And then the complicated is that if we are able to fly out on the Monday night, would I still get home in time to catch my flight to Thailand? And I didn't really want to have to get off one plane and jump straight back onto another plane. But anyway, we contacted the airline on Sunday, and they said, oh, the weather is slightly clearing, and it turns out the first flight out of Toyama to Tokyo was the 7 p.m. flight, which is what we had tickets booked for. So we were able to make the flight back to Tokyo and make our connecting flight from Tokyo to Sydney. And I was able to have a day at home before flying out to Chiang Mai. Coming back from Thailand, a couple of days after, I get a phone call from my accountant. And they said, we've had to make an adjustment on your tax return. They didn't have all the information from the share portfolio, and as a result, my tax return payment that I had to make had been reduced by $8,000, which is the same amount that I needed to purchase the plans for the boat. So you know how I was saying earlier about God has a plan? Well, it turns out that he does have a plan. So for the rest of the year, I've been studying as much as I can about boat building, about boat systems and plumbing and electrical, and just trying to learn as much as I possibly can about building a boat. One of the things about the Dix470 that has really drawn my attention was the fact that it was available as a kit form. And what I mean by that is that all the plywood components will be CNC cut. Means Kel in Melbourne will be cutting all the plywood for us. We'll be packing that up and putting it into a container along with the mast. All yacht spas are making the mast, the catwalk and the forebeam. And Luxford Marine in Mornington supplying a whole lot of other components. So all of that will get packed up into a container and shipped to us here in Toyama. Hopefully it will arrive mid-March. Hope you'll join us for the adventure of building this boat. So I plan to try and get weekly updates out of the build and how we're going and what we've done that week, so that you can stay in touch and see how the progress of the boat is going. Should be a lot of fun. Please join us. Thank you.